so I already know a little bit from Jeremy how many designers are in the room. Considerably fewer than I expected. I'll still ask the same question because it'll apply to everyone. Who has had a negative experience getting feedback from a client? Hey, okay, so that sounds about right. The good news is you're not alone. Has anyone come across this site, clientsfromhell.net? Has anyone submitted to it? All right, there's a lot of great stories on there about difficult clients, right? And reading through some of them, I was thinking about why is this? Why is it such a problem that clients can come in and just kind of destroy a design, right? So that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about tonight. I think that it has a little bit to do with this, right? So I feel like design tends to take place on this continuum, right? The design itself, the output, might be more function-based, right? What we're thinking about, and it might also be more form-based. And similarly, the process, the actual practice of the design, might be more scientific and it might be more artistic. And it's interesting to look at different types of design and consider the relationship with the client in both instances. So on one hand, we have things like interaction design, right, which is a little bit more formal. There's a whole academics around it. And when we're focusing on functional things, we tend to have a lot of great tools for basically having an objective conversation about our decisions, right? So we have data to support, hey, no one's clicking on that page. Why don't we remove it? Or why don't we change it? We can do things like card sorting to determine how to label our navigation. We can do things like usability testing to figure out why people aren't making it all the way through that task. So this tends to be the more objective type of design. But clients never look at that, right? A lot of it's below the surface. You hand them an extensive wireframe document, what are you going to get? You hand them a blueprint, the feedback is usually, yeah, looks good, right? But as soon as you start to put the aesthetic layer on it, right? As soon as you start to incorporate colors, typography, textures, imagery, suddenly they have a lot to say. And so does everyone they know. So the issue here is that it's not so much that we don't have tools on this side, right? So professional graphic designers have all kinds of tools. They have all kinds of knowledge about aesthetics and what makes a good aesthetic, right? Color theory, right? Has anyone heard of that? That's a thing. I think kerning is not super subjective. Some may take issue with that, but I know what good kerning looks like. I can usually teach a client. What else do we have in that category? If you're really sophisticated, you might be pulling from things like Gestalt psychology to justify your design. You might be thinking about the aesthetics of beauty, right? Kind of the topic tonight. You might be able to pull from philosophers. You might be able to pull from art history. But you know what? None of those matter in a client conversation, I found, at least. And that's because the clients are not assessing your design at that rational level. They're experiencing it much like an end user would, emotionally, right? So that's kind of the question I have, is how do we make it so that the client, most specifically, because that's kind of how I'm framing this, right? How do we make it less of a subjective conversation so that we can remove opinions? Because you know what happens when you have a design argument based on opinions, right? Whose wins? The highest paid person's opinion wins. And you're left as the designer under the hippo. All right, so let's talk about how we can begin to change this. I think at that end of the spectrum, we're talking about functional value of a product, right? Does it do what it should? Does it do something that the end users are going to want? Does it work? Does it function, right? When we're talking about the form of something and we're getting into this fuzzy, aesthetic, scary, dark area where the clients are going to tell us they don't like the color of the button, We're talking about something else entirely. We're talking about the emotional value of a product or of a design, whatever the design is. And the question that I ask there is this. What is it that we want the audience to feel when they're engaged with our product or service or brand, whatever it may be? And when we can start to put a foundation of emotion into what we're doing, why we're doing it, who we're doing it for, then we can start building upon that a real strategy. So this is pretty new, right? I wrote most of this morning, so I don't know how valid it is yet. But this is my kind of makeshift model for thinking about this, right? So if we start our strategy over here with emotion, then we can start to think, okay, well, what traits or characteristics or attributes of our design can conceivably create that emotion, right? So those start to look like this in the middle. Attributes, things like these trade-offs. This is one way of talking about them, right? I want to be inviting, but not, what did I say, cozy, etc. And then when we think of those attributes, we can start to get closer to the surface and say, all right, well, what kind of sensory experience is going to make the user feel like they're experiencing those attributes and ultimately that emotion. So that's where I'm going with this. So this is one thing that we have tried with clients a few times, and to varying degrees of success, but this is pretty close to that attributes level, right? How we're going to figure out what emotion we should have users feeling is a different question, but at the attributes level, it's a little bit easier. And we ask this question in kickoffs, and what we want is that the clients will generate as many ideas as possible. And when you do that, especially if you do it with multiple stakeholders, you find that they don't even agree. They don't even agree about what their design, their brand, their website should look like. So we do this exercise. It's a common pattern in kind of lean design facilitation, is have them write on one idea per sticky, a trait or characteristic of what happens when you meet this brand. And this is kind of the end result. We put them all up on the wall, and we start manipulating them. We start grouping them. And every now and then we find, oh, wow, everyone had the same idea. That's pretty strong. And then we'll say, well, you said it's a 50-year-old male, and you said it's an 18-year-old female. So that feels like a different design or a different brand to me. And then you kind of hash it out, and this creates a foundation of understanding, right? And that's the starting point. From there, we synthesize it. We try to make sense of what the client was trying to communicate, and we put it back at them. This was made by Brooke, by the way. I see her going like this, so I should credit her. All right, this is an example of a mood board. And so we're taking what the client gave us and checking for understanding, right? Is this what you meant? Is this what it looks like? Are we conveying the right emotion here with these kind of aesthetic characteristics? Okay, so I want to run kind of an experiment. I have no idea how this is going to work. It might be very embarrassing for me. But what I'm going to do on the next few slides is I'm going to show you guys two images. There's going to be one on the right and one on the left. I guess right, left, stage right. And I want you guys, I'm going to count to 3. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 on each slide. And I want you guys to not shout, but loudly say which one makes you happier, you personally. Okay, so this is the context for this is, let's say we just had a great meeting with a client. We talked about what emotion they want to convey, what's the emotional value. And they said, we want our brand to make people happy. Okay? So your people I'm going to try to make happy. And I want you to tell me which image makes you happy, right or left. Okay? So 1, 2, 3, right. Okay. Thanks, Jeremy, by the way. These are from the Noun Project. Okay, so it sounded like there were some differences of opinion there. Okay, let's try it again. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Oh, wow, we've got a lot of right people on this one. I didn't catch that. So some people are happier in a crowded, energetic, rave, and others like the tranquil kind of aesthetic, right? Let's try another one. 1, 2, 3. Right. Okay, so this tends to make you guys happier. There's still a few lefts, right? We're not in complete accordance here. All right, one more. Right or left? 1, 2, 3. Right. I'm seeing an interesting trend here, which is that the left people take longer to respond. I'm not sure what that means, but I'd say it warrants further research. Okay, so I was expecting a little more discordance, but let me try to explain it away. This is the magic of selling design. This group is similar in certain ways, right? We all self-selected to come to these talks tonight. Many of us are designers. Clearly, many of us value some alone time, peace and tranquility. So, you guys are going to have a certain set of opinions about these. But the user might disagree, and the client might disagree. So the question is, regardless of whether or not this group's in agreement, how do we get on the same page as the people that we need to be on the same page with? First the client, and then the users. And this is, if this talk was on BuzzFeed, the title would be something like, "And this one weird trick that will cause you to never fight with clients again." And as a UX designer, I learned this trick. It took several years into my design career. But the trick is to make it about the user, right? So when the client says, "Well, I don't know, what do you think? Why did you do it that way? Do you like the design?" You say, "Oh, I didn't really think about it. I was, what do the users think?" And then the client's like, "Oh, yeah, what do the users think?" Maybe that's what we should be asking. Yeah, so this is kind of, once you have that strategy, once you have the agreement with the client of what we want people to feel, this is the next step. This is the other trick. It's what does happiness mean to this person who is not us, right? So for those of you familiar with interaction design or UX design, a very common thing we produce is personas, right? These are kind of synthesized versions of a certain group of users. And this isn't a particularly robust one, but it's a profile of someone that I want to share with you. So this is Samantha. She goes by Sam. That's pretty important to her. She'll correct you if you ask. She just celebrated her 39th birthday. She recently moved from Manhattan to, where is it, Wayne? Yeah, Wayne, New Jersey, for the purpose of simplifying her life. So they have a young child, as you can see. That's Violet. She's really into yoga. In fact, she has these fantasies about going away for a month and doing a kind of yoga retreat. And she's pregnant with her second baby, right? Another reason for moving out of the city. So when we think about her, I want to answer these questions from her perspective. Okay, so let's see if we get a little more agreement. So for Sam, which of these makes her happier? 1, 2, 3. You guys are good. Oh, so now we have some passionate disagreement. It sounds a little bit stronger. Okay, so the good news is you can disagree and you can have a discussion about this because it's much easier to validate than having the boss say, "I think right, and therefore right." If we disagree for Sam, then the question is, let's find Sam and ask her, right? Let's find a way to actually measure this with our users. Let's try it again. 1, 2, 3. Right. Okay, yeah, that seems right to me too. 1, 2, 3. Left. Oh, so that kind of surprised me. Are you sure? Yeah. I'm curious. Okay, I'm curious to hear from you guys. Why is left happier for Sam? Right. Oh, sorry. Why is right? What's that? So to do this effectively, we need to to do this effectively, we need to be able to empathize with her, right? So some of us who have maybe been in her shoes, who have actually been mothers or women or that age, or lived in New Jersey, or trying to escape New York, or want to go to India, you might have a little more insight than the designer who hasn't done that, had that experience and hasn't done the research to back it up. So it's kind of interesting in this experimental fashion to hear what people say. All right, let's do the last one. I'm really curious about this one. 1, 2, 3. Right. Okay, cool. So everyone pretty much agreed on everything, which wasn't necessarily what I was trying to demonstrate, but the takeaway here is that we need to view even aesthetics, not just the functional value of what we're trying to create, but also the emotional value through the lens of the user. So to do this, we have to understand who those people are and come up with ways to assess whether or not we're achieving the emotion that we want to convey. So that's kind of how I'm going to end it. This is a whole nother probably series of talks. I don't even know if anyone has the answers, but I will say, is Jeremiah coming next time? 2 weeks? Okay, check back in 2 weeks. 2 months. Check back in 2 months, because a lot of my thinking on this has been influenced by someone who's going to be giving a talk here. So that'll probably be a good one to attend with respect to how do we measure these things that are more emotional. All right, that's it for me. Thank you.